كما غاني كان يقول لك on my career, I've been mostly working on the interface of wireless communication and AI. قريت في الجزائر، كنت في الباك، وماد رحت فرنسا. I started in France basically my career doing a PhD in a university called École Normale Supérieure Paris-Saclay, also known as École Normale Supérieure Cachan, with a background mostly on mathematics related to that. Then basically I started my career by working with Motorola for a couple of years. After I went working basically in Austria for 1 year at the Vienna Research Center of Telecommunication. And then I came back to academia and became an assistant professor in a research institute called Eurocom, which is located in the south of France. And then quite young, at the age of 31, I was lucky to become full professor, which was quite rare at that time. And I had a big group with the chair of Alcatel-Lucent, which is linked to Bell Labs. And during 7 years, I was working heavily on 4G and the premises of 5G. And this is where basically a lot of my momentum started, where I was one of the co-inventor of the technology called Massive MIMO, which is key in 5G. And then I built a big group basically related to wireless communication in Paris. And then in 2014, Huawei approached me and wanted to establish a big research center of 200 people in Paris. So that was a good opportunity for me, and I took it. And then I established what we call the Mathematical and Algorithmic Sciences Lab in Paris. And also just after, I also established a more focus on the mathematics and computing, which is now very important, as you all know, called the Lagrange Center. And so during those 7 years at Huawei, I was one of the builders of basically the 5G momentum of Huawei, and especially with the technology called Polar Codes. And also basically this Lagrange Center also, which hosted a lot of middle fields. And in 2021, as Abdelghani said, I was approached by the UAE to establish another center here in the UAE called basically the AI and Digital Science Research Center, and also kick off the big activity around AI in the UAE. And I was one of the driver of the biggest, largest language model in Arabic called Noor. Noor is the name of my daughter. And second, basically Falcon, which is now the biggest, largest open source model in the world with 180 billion parameters. And last month, or 1 month ago, or no, 2 months ago, I was also approached by Khalifa to kick off a new activity related to 6G and establish the 6G research center. So you could say that I'm more a research center entrepreneur in terms of building them, but also I've been also kicking off a couple of startups during my career. And here, the main purpose of my discussion with you here is give you some lessons that I learned across my career so that you could basically improve your skills and how you could achieve your goals. And for that, I'm going to give you a setup of conclusions that I got, which are very easy. And I think you know them, but I think it's very important for you to re-stress them. Of course, it's more or less about my career at the interface of, I would say, mathematics, engineering, computer science. These things do not necessarily translate to other disciplines, although there's very, I would say, commonalities with people who decide to do biology, for example. But for sure, for somebody, for example, who's...
Sorry, Professor Merouane, your screen is crashed in the first slide.
Okay, I'm sorry. So let me now reshare. Maybe that's what I have to do. But in case, that's good because we don't have so many slides. So it's not going to be a problem. Share screen. And okay. So do you see now my new screen? Yeah? Abdelghani, راك تشوف l'écran تاعي؟ Hello?
Yes, I'm seeing it.
Okay, very good. Yeah, and so some what I call simple but important facts, and I'll go through them, which I think are very important for your career. And again, what I was saying is they don't necessarily translate to other disciplines, but they have commonalities. So a guy who's doing, for example, biology would still have the same kind of questions that are being asked. However, of course, somebody who's not into, I would say, high-end type of studies, then maybe things will be different. So the first question in general that people ask is, should I go for an engineering kind of study or a PhD study? So that's a very good question. And the question is what each one brings you. In general, basically, an engineering study, which is the level of basically 5 years after the baccalaureate, provides you, of course, some focus on engineering, but it's still a bit broad in terms of expertise. Versus a PhD, it's 3 years after your engineering diploma. In general, it's 3 years, but some countries, they have 4 or 5 years. The worst is that I know is Germany with more or less 5 years. And there you're focusing on a more detailed type of work because you're focusing on more research. And by doing research, of course, you're trying to push the limit of a very good topic. So, of course, a PhD by itself has not as an intention for you to become a professor or become an academic. If you go, for example, in the US, many of the PhDs basically are working in companies. And I think this is important for you to understand that when you do what we call a doctorat, it doesn't mean that you're going to end up basically doing a career in academia. And of course, you can also do politics, by the way. If you took an example is Angela Merkel, for example, as you know, Angela Merkel was basically during many years at the head of the German state. And this also showcases you that a lot of career. What's important when you do a PhD is more or less that you start learning how to do things with a research mindset. And the research mindset is, of course, differently from engineering. What the engineer would do is basically try to solve problems, whereas a PhD will try to create problems. 2 different ways. Problem-solving skills are related that in general you have a well-defined problem, or you come up with a well-defined problem and then you solve it. Whereas a PhD will try to create and establish a new discipline and try to push it, basically because you're opening some kind of doors. Second thing also that is very important is today, doing a PhD opens you also a lot of doors in terms of management positions, because especially as now it has become the status in all big companies, of course, it provides you the opportunity to be at the level of being able also to manage other people who have a PhD. And I think this is also very important for you because you start understanding broader skills, and the kind of work that you've been doing pushes you to be able to tackle new topics very fast and have also that capability. Now, of course, the problem with a PhD is that it takes time. And if I was one of you, I would always engage into a PhD. The problem is, of course, you always come at a given period of your career, where maybe you don't have the money to do it, or your family is not supportive. So sometimes you can't do that PhD. But nonetheless, you have to know that a PhD does not necessitate also the fact that you do it just after your engineering diploma. You could decide to work and then come back and do a PhD after a couple of years. That's also possible. But it would require that you do some kind of engineering work, which is at the level of engineering work, meaning it's not that you had an engineer and then you start working from doing marketing. So you need to keep up being in the technicalities of what you're doing. And today, by the way, if you're working in machine learning, AI, which are domains which are very important, you'll see that nearly all the big shots that you hear about, Gianluca and others, all they have PhDs. All the startups which are being created today are mostly driven by PhD, I would say, holders. And that gives you also a sense of the fact that the skills which are required becomes deeper and deeper. And I think it's very important, again, to stress that it's not a question of academia or industry. A lot of the PhD people that I know go in industry today. And basically, you can do a very good career by doing a PhD in industry, which is my case, for example. Second thing also, which I think is very important for your career, is the kind of mindset that you have. And one of the big things that I saw in my career is that a lot of people are looking at situations which are well established. And because they're well established, they think this is a great place to work. My basic experience was that, in fact, the best places to work are places where it's messy, where there's nothing, where everything needs to be built. Why? Because when the situation is not very good, you have to look at it as an opportunity. When things are well established, it's very hard for you to move in or drive anything. You're just going on the mainstream. And the level of disruptions or movements or capability that you have is very low. When you go in a situation, in which is my case, for example, when I moved, for example, in the south of France to Supélec at that time, there was not doing much research. Everybody told me, why are you going to this place where basically it's not the kind of university that you could have? Well, the main reason I went there is because nothing was happening. And when you arrive in a place where nothing is happening, you can establish legacy. And I think this is very good as a mindset for all of you, is that, and especially in Algeria. In Algeria, in the case of Algeria, there's a lot of problems. And those problems are opportunities that you need to seize, because when things are well established, you don't have much degrees. When I came here in the UAE 2 years ago, there was nearly nothing being done in the realm of AI. And a lot of people question, why would you go to the UAE today when you don't have basically all that kind of things that you have in Europe? Well, I went to the UAE because I knew that that was a very good opportunity for me to establish legacy. So every time there are problems, think about how you can establish legacy. And I think this is also some mindset that you need to have in your head. You don't go to a place to complain. You go to a place to analyze the fact that things are not working. And if they're not working, good for you. You're there basically a boulevard for you to solve it in the way you want to shape it. And in general, I realized that the number of people who are willing to take the lead are very few. People will follow you because basically, in general, people are lost when there is a situation which is problematic. The third thing also, which I realized, is also how you approach basically seeking a job. I get many emails of people asking me to work with me. And many times I don't have basically a position for them because basically I don't have the bandwidth for them. But you have to know that many times in my life, I decided also to recruit people even though I didn't have the bandwidth. And in fact, it's in the wording and the way you approach basically the people. Many emails that you write in general are the kind of emails saying, "Dear professor, my name is blah, blah, blah. My CV is this. I have done this, and I'm now looking for a job." That's a very bad way to approach a person. The way you should approach a person is the following. "Dear professor, my name is, I've been working since now on this topic. I have read basically your papers. I have deeply analyzed the kind of work that you're doing. I have this proposition where I think I can provide value to your group. And this is the proposition I'm giving you. Blah, 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 blah." And you express why you think your project that you've built, coming to me is the right place to do it instead of doing it elsewhere. Because if you trigger that thing, you come with a value to me. And if you come to a value to me, then for me, it means that you will increase basically my capability of my group. In that case, what I'm going to do is start to try to find funding. Because I know that if I can match basically your recruitment, then you will double basically the earnings that I had before. And this is not related to me, it's related in general to any job. Because in general, jobs are created by you. They're not there to be filled. They're created by you because basically you come with some value to the group and you bring that value where you will multiply the value of basically that entity with a certain factor. So the whole goal as basically a leader for me is to find the initial seed that will help you kickstart your activity and which will multiply basically the kind of funding that I had. And I think all the emails that you're writing, you need to think it totally different in the way that when I write, I'm proposing and not asking. I have something great in my hand, and I'm giving them to you. And so I'm giving it to you because you're the right person who could make it happen. Whereas if you ask a job, it's like, do you have a list of openings that I can fulfill? No, I don't have a list of openings, because list of openings do not happen like this. They need to be created based on proposals. I don't have the bandwidth to create proposals as much as I want, for a simple reason, I'm a human. However, you can create those proposals for me. And I think the mindset that you need to have has to be very different from that point of view. The fourth thing, which I think is very important also, is a lot of people seek a job in terms of looking at money as the first basically criteria. I think money in life is what we call collateral. What I mean by collateral, it means that when you work, you start earning money because you do good work. And you'll see that all the big entrepreneurs that I've been seeing in many cases, in many situations that you can consider, many of these, yes, if you start considering them, have a philosophy of kickstarting first an activity. Focus on money in your life can be very detrimental. All the big startup people who have created, and at least all the big entrepreneurs, they never started a company by looking at making money. They always looked at how to make a difference. And you can take a look at it. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, all these guys, when their focus at the beginning was to solve a problem for the humanity. The collateral when you do your good work is money. And I think if you focus at the beginning of your career on earning money, you'll be losing a big part of what you could do in terms of exploding in your career. Money will come if you do good work. Trust me, it's always there. The fifth also advice in your career that I'm going to give you is a lot of people try to exploit situation, and you rarely spend time around you on caring on the people around you, meaning basically helping your surrounding, giving a bit of your time, doing basically what, for example, Abdul Ghani is doing at the moment. You have to know that the people who position you, the people who recommend you, is your network. The more you give, the more you're going to be recommended. The more that you take, the less you're going to be recommended. And this is very important. Many times in my career, I was quite surprised that by helping people I would not even have noticed about, I just gave them some support for 5 or 10 minutes. I encountered those people basically a couple of years later in top positions. And basically they gave me back the time that I gave them multiple times. If you're in a situation where you're not giving your time, your knowledge, your help to the surrounding, you'll see that you're not creating an ecosystem around you. Of course, it takes a burden of you because you're spending your weekends, you're spending your nights on things that you think are useless. But the people around you, be careful, are the ones which are recommending you. So take the time needed to support the people around you, and they will give it back because you're going to be creating a network. The other advice that I also think is very important that I realized in my career is a lot of people avoid taking responsibilities. You have to take responsibilities. What I mean by that is that in a situation when nobody wants to take the work, take it because people will notice it. Take it and do it well. Don't care about the fact that it's super important. Take the things that nobody wants to do. The things that nobody wants to do turns out to be very useful because basically people will notice that you can nail down a problem and they will always come back to you for asking you more and more basically of your time to do it. So take any opportunity you have to showcase basically your skills and be responsible in delivering it on time. Many times, especially some of my PhD students that I had in groups, the ones which were taking basically the part where nobody wanted to take them, typically, oh, I'm focusing on my PhD. I don't have time, Professor DEBBAH, to support you in organizing this conference because I have to do this. Nobody wanted to support me. And then there's one who supports me. That guy who supported me, everybody noticed in him. When he got his PhD, he got immediately work because people basically created that network and saw him. So you have to be able to take that kind of responsibility of taking the things that nobody wants. And many things you'll see in life, people don't want to take it because they think it's irrelevant. In fact, if nobody takes it, again, it's an opportunity for you to showcase what you can do. Another thing also, which I think is of high relevance for you, is working in a company. Working in a company is not the fact that you work basically from 8 to 5 and leave. Of course, you can always work from 8 to 5. This is not an issue. But the issue is not to work in a company, but to impact your time when you work in a company. What I mean by impact, if you're seeing that your work is not having an impact on something, then it means that you're not also able to provide some legacy in that company. And basically, you're not becoming visible. And if you're not becoming visible, then that's an issue. So if your goal is to work from 8 to 5 in a company, then I would suggest you to change immediately your time and basically either work more or change a company. The whole purpose of the fact that you are now basically engineers, PhDs, is that your work has to be impactful. And impactful meaning that it has to generate revenue, it has to generate disruption, it has to help people, but it has to be noticed in some way. So of course, choosing impactful projects are not always easy. But again, you're the one creating the impactfulness. And the impactfulness has various manners. It means either basically that you were or assigned to an impactful project, or if you see that that project is not impactful, then you have to shape it in the right way to be impactful and see how you can connect the dots with other things of that company. Working in a company just for working does not make sense, because basically it means that after 30 years, nobody noticed what you have done. And this is an issue. And so if nobody has noticed what you have done, it means that your work is not relevant to the community. And if it's not relevant to the community, there's an issue. So again, whatever you do, you have to do it extremely good. You have to be convinced by what you're doing, and you have to see how it can impact the society, the people around you, the company, or generate revenue. I think this is extremely important because a lot of people take the work they are doing just by the fact that it's going to be corresponding to a salary. Again, you are basically scientists. You are basically having computer scientist degrees. You are in a position where you're not there to work just for hours. You're there basically to work, to impact. And salary, basically, again, is going to be a collateral of that activity. What I mean by that is that at one moment, people are going to start soliciting you more and more, basically, to help them. Another thing also, which I think is very important from the number of years that I've been working, is basically also how you change position in a company. The only time you should apply for a job if you're successful is when you go out from school. It could be, of course, going out from school at a PhD level or basically at the engineering level. That's the first time. Why? Because basically nobody knows you and it's only your CV which speaks for yourself. Clear for everybody? And so what I mean by CV, not even CV, it's your grading which speaks for yourself. And so you apply for a position, and that's the only time you apply for a position. In a successful career, anytime you change positions, it's done by people who decide to take you from where you are because they think you are again, impactful, relevant, to come to work for them. These people who come to take you from where you are to work for them are called headhunters. Headhunters are people who are spending their time. I'm doing that, by the way. I would say that 15 or 20% of my time is headhunting. What I do is I ask colleagues, oh, do you know a good postdoc who can do this? Things like that. I'm looking for a research engineer. Do you know somebody? Things like that. And then they tell me, oh, yeah, in that university, there's a clever guy. He's been doing since 2 years a full data set. He built a data set and no. And I think you should approach him. And then I write an email and approach the guy. And I tell him, look, my name is Professor Merouane DEBBAH. I am working on this. I saw that you do this. I think that your work could be multiplied by n-fold if you come and join forces with me, because I have exactly the structure to enable you to port that thing. These are headhunters, and every time you change jobs in your career, it's because you're called at one moment to go there. Of course, to be able to be called, it means that what you're doing becomes relevant and visible. So it means, again, goes back to my previous point, you need to be impactful in what you do. If you start changing jobs after a couple of years by applying, it means that within your work, nobody has been interested by what you're doing, and nobody has seen the visibility and the value that you have, and you're applying just like as if you were a fresh student. This is an issue. So again, the only time you apply for your career is basically at the, I would say, finishing of your studies. And then every time you're going to be applying, it's based basically on the fact that, again, you've been headhunted. That has been, by the way, for my case. Once I finished my PhD, I worked simultaneously at Motorola Labs. And I remember that the market was extremely bad. We were in the year 2002. So 2002, I think you're still young. There was what we call a telecom bubble. And the market in France was terrible. And so, of course, at the time, in 2002, getting a job was extremely complicated. And I had published a paper, basically, on some things that in my PhD I was doing related to, I will not go into details, but it's called a free probability theory framework, basically, to design communication systems. When I published that work, I got a call from a manager in Austria. And the email, I still have it. The email was saying, dear Merouane, I read your paper. I am extremely impressed by basically the results of your paper. I would like to invite you to come in Vienna to give a talk on your paper. And based on that, basically, I would like also to offer you a position in my institute. And so again, that was the first time I realized that people are here to take you from where you are, because you realize the value that you have can be multiplied at their place. And this has been done continuously until my last appointment here in the UAE, where basically I got a position coming here. And I think it's very important for you to understand that point is to do that. Of course, I'm talking about a successful career. Not everybody's successful. And sometimes, of course, you get some situations which are complicated because you're in a situation, an environment where it's not capable of providing you that visibility. So if it's not, you have to do two things. Stay in the company and find a way to become that visible guy in the good sense. Again, when I mean visible, it means that we recruit you not because you're doing politics. We recruit you because you're technically good, okay? Or basically you change company. The last one point, and I think I'm going to finish with my 20 minutes of time for Abdelghani, is basically the mindset that you have related to being an open-minded or versus closed mind. I realized, especially in Algeria, that a lot of people are not spending time enough in things which are outside their focus. So if you're a computer scientist, you would ask me why basically I should become good in languages. Why should I spend time learning arts? Why should I spend time learning music? Why should I spend time doing something else? This is what I call an open mind. An open mind is somebody basically who spends time learning things outside its field. Closed mind is somebody who's very focused. You can't know the time and opportunities I got when I realized that a lot of things I was doing on the side of my time helped me in my career. So, doing music, for example, learning languages, spending time on improving your skills in terms of how you communicate, improving these are extremely high value because once you'll get into other positions, you'll see that you'll be connecting the dots with many things. The good example, of course, is Steve Jobs. So I think you all know Steve Jobs of Apple. He spent a lot of time learning basically Indian culture, Sanskrits, and all these things. In one of his biggest, I would say, speech that he made in a graduation of university, he was exactly saying the point I'm telling you. He said, well, I realized that the time I had spent trying to understand the Indian culture turned out to be extremely useful in the designs that I had built basically at Apple. And especially all these icons, culture, stuff like that, was inspired by what he was doing in India and the time he spent with all this external, I would say, kind of activity. In your case, you'll see at one moment that you'll be able to connect the dots when you're open-minded. What I mean by that is that take every opportunity to read books which are outside your realm. Take every opportunity to interact with people who are outside your main focus. Because these kind of things are the situation where you'll connect the dots and you'll be able to be facing in the future with very good, I would say, capabilities of solving some problems that nobody can solve because of the fact that you're very open-minded. And so again, the work that you're doing at university for sure is very important. But on top of that, you need to dedicate time to start building yourself in terms of culture, building yourself outside the realm of what you're doing, trying to read things in which you have not been, I would say, sensitive enough. And you'll see that you'll be able to connect the dots. I think I'm going to finish with this and then go back to Abdelghani. I wanted to be short because these points, I think, are quite relevant now after all these years that I've been working. They are very simple, but important facts that you need to have in mind to build up your career. It's not magic that I'm talking about. It's very, I would say, clear kind of things that I'm giving you here.